"Don't talk, you're old," she said, not even looking at me, her manicured fingers twirling the stem of her wineglass. The sentence fell into the room like a plate dropped in a quiet kitchen, shocking only for those who still cared. And apparently, I was the only one who did. I raised my glass without trembling. "Yet still smarter than your father," I said calmly, my eyes on Brian across the table. He winced. No one laughed. Not a soul. The rest of the table froze, forks in midair, eyes darting. Claire rolled her eyes and mumbled something under her breath. But I didn't catch it. I didn't need to. I'd heard enough. That moment, like so many in recent years, had been building up, like slow sediment at the bottom of a lake. And now, suddenly, we were here, seated around a table in my son's new house, on the edge of town, surrounded by polished wood and cold smiles, pretending to be a family. The roast chicken was going cold. The salad wilted in the heavy silence. Marlene, Brian's wife, Claire's mother, picked up her wine glass, took a long sip, then looked at the painting on the wall as if she hadn't just heard her daughter slap her mother-in-law with words. No one defended me. No one corrected Claire. No one even blinked. Just a silence. Not heavy, but practiced. Rehearsed. And yet, I didn't leave. Not yet. I sat back in my chair and placed my napkin in my lap, like the polite woman I'd been raised to be. I could feel the heat behind my eyes, but I kept my chin up. Dignity doesn't demand noise. I looked around the table. Claire, 23, with her business degree, her clever mouth, and her glossy hair. Her boyfriend sat next to her, shifting uncomfortably, unsure whether to smile or excuse himself. Brian, my son, at the head of the table, carving the chicken with too much force, pretending not to have heard. Marlene, perfect and polished, buttering her roll with surgical precision. And me, the ghost who paid for most of this house but no longer matched the decor. I'd brought wine. A good bottle, too. Something French. I knew Claire liked French wines. I knew because I remembered. Unlike them, I remembered everything. 2 days ago, I'd stood in my small kitchen and tied the ribbon on the bottle myself, thinking it might warm the mood, or at least remind them that I existed beyond the checkbook. I remember Brian's text. Dinner's casual, nothing fancy, 6 sharp. Casual, not warm, not welcome, just expected. Like furniture, like old wallpaper. The room was too warm now. Not from emotion, no, God forbid, but from central heating and closed windows. Marlene always hated a draft. I could still hear her the first time she visited my old house. So charming, but all those creaky windows. Must be awful in winter. They never returned after that, not even when I had pneumonia. Claire had sent a text. Sorry you're sick. Hope you're okay. Love you. I didn't reply. I was coughing too hard to type. And now, here she was, the grown woman I had once read bedtime stories to, telling me to stay quiet because I was old. As if age was a defect. As if my voice expired along with the milk. I looked at Brian again. He still hadn't looked up. That was worse than Claire's words. Because children learn from silence more than sermons. A drop of wine clung to the rim of my glass. I watched it until it fell. Slow, quiet, inevitable. Excuse me, I said, though no one did. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked to the powder room down the hall. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in front of anyone since 1998. But I sat on the closed toilet lid and stared at the tiled floor for a long time. There, in the quiet, I thought about the last 20 years, the things I did, the things I gave, the moments I bit my tongue, I thought about the loans I never got back, the birthdays I spent alone, the way my name was always Mom or Gran, never Betty, as if my identity existed only in relation to them. I touched my wedding ring, still worn on a chain around my neck, and whispered, "You wouldn't have let them speak to me like that, would you, Richard?" But Richard had been gone 14 years, and I was still here, still setting tables, still picking gifts, still arriving on time, wearing the right blouse, trying to earn affection that should have come without an invoice. I splashed cold water on my face, dried it, looked in the mirror. My lipstick had faded, but my eyes hadn't. Still clear, still steady. Older, yes. But old? No. I returned to the table, sat back down. No one asked if I was all right. So I lifted my glass again. "To health," I said, and looked directly at Claire. "And to memory. Some of us still have both." I drank. One long, slow sip. Set the glass down without a sound. No one clapped, but Marlene shifted. Brian coughed. Claire picked up her fork, but her hand shook just slightly, and I smiled. Not because I was pleased, but because I had finally begun. The thing about being old, really, properly old, is that you stop expecting people to see you, not out of bitterness, out of practice. That night, when I got back to my small apartment, I didn't take off my shoes right away. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the quiet. The clock in the kitchen ticked like it always did. A familiar sound, faithful in a way my family no longer was. I'd brought back the wine. No one opened it. I didn't leave it there either. They wouldn't have noticed, but I would have. I couldn't stand the thought of it sitting on their shelf, unopened and unremembered, like so many things I'd given them over the years. My coat still smelled faintly of Marlene's perfume. She hugged me briefly when I arrived, one of those careful, polite embraces. Chin pulled back, arms light, body tilted away. Just enough to suggest warmth without offering it. I'd smiled, grateful anyway. How ridiculous that seemed now. I hung the coat, kicked off the shoes, sat in the armchair that used to belong to Richard. It still had the indent from his body, even after all these years, even after I'd flipped the cushions and aired it in the sun. Some things don't leave, even when they're gone. On the coffee table, an old newspaper. Crossword half finished. A pencil with bite marks. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember when I'd started biting pencils again. The heater rattled to life. I hadn't noticed how cold it was until then. I tucked a blanket around my legs and watched the reflection of the streetlight move across the window glass like a slow ghost. Dinner had lasted exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes. I'd arrived at 6, as instructed. Brian hadn't opened the door himself. It was Claire. "Oh, hi," she said flatly, as if I were the neighbor dropping off misdelivered mail. "Hello, darling," I said. "Happy Friday." She didn't respond. I handed her the bottle, which she accepted without thanks, just looked at the label and muttered, "French. Figures." At the time, I hadn't known what that meant. Now, I thought I did. Marlene emerged from the kitchen, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. She looked flawless. They always do. You never see the cracks until you're underneath them. "Betty," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "Glad you could come." Brian's setting the table. "No rush," I replied, taking off my gloves. "I brought the Chateau Neuf du Pape you liked last Christmas." "Oh," she said, her smile thinning. "That was generous." That was when I first sensed it. The mood. like I'd stepped into a scene where my role had been rewritten, and no one told me. Everyone was polite. Everyone smiled. But underneath it all, there was a quiet choreography I no longer belonged to. They spoke over me, around me. I was included only when Claire needed a prop for a story. Grandma's house used to smell like mothballs, remember? Or when Marlene needed to demonstrate domestic grace. Betty, do try the endive salad. Claire made it herself. The salad was bitter. I remember watching Brian as he poured wine into everyone's glasses, but skipped mine. Not out of cruelty, I think. Out of habit. Like I didn't count. I said nothing. I poured it myself. It was somewhere between the overcooked chicken and the too warm Chardonnay that Claire told me not to talk. I don't even remember what I'd said. Something minor. A comment about her university, maybe. Something to do with tuition. I'd paid it, after all. All 4 years. Don't talk, she said, her mouth tight. You're old. That was the moment, the crack that let in the cold, the sentence that uncurled everything I'd folded neatly for decades. Now, sitting alone in my apartment, I felt it all return. The favors, the wiring money for their first house, the down payment for Claire's car, the groceries I delivered during lockdown, the birthdays they forgot, the holidays they skipped, the gifts I never received. I had believed, truly believed, that love would return if I gave enough. That maybe they were busy, distracted, but not ungrateful. That maybe I had done something wrong, something to make them distance themselves. But now I saw it clearly. I hadn't been a mother or grandmother to them for a long time. I'd been a reliable resource, a polite presence, a placeholder. And then I remembered the moment before dinner, when I had stood in their front hallway, brushing lint off my coat sleeve, and overheard Claire whispering to her mother, "Let's just get through it. She'll probably leave early anyway." They hadn't seen me standing there. They'd expected me to fade out, like old wallpaper, like background noise. But I hadn't. Not then. And I wouldn't now. I reached for my notebook, the one I kept tucked under the couch cushion, opened to the first blank page, wrote one sentence. Starting tomorrow, I remember who I am. I put down the pen. Tomorrow would be Saturday. And for the first time in a long while, I wouldn't spend it waiting for anyone to call. Saturday morning came soft and pale through the kitchen curtains. I let it in without hurrying. I didn't boil the kettle right away. I just stood at the window, watching the frost slowly recede from the garden fence, as if the world, too, was waking from something heavy. I didn't sleep much, not from worry. Not anymore. It was something else, like my mind had too many drawers open at once. The sentence Claire said, and the silence that followed. My own voice saying, "Yet still smarter than your father." And how no one, not even Brian, had met my eyes after that. For years, I'd taught young people to speak with respect. At school, I had been feared, even loved. "Mrs. Maxwell's word is final," they used to say. "She doesn't raise her voice, she lowers the room." And now, at my own son's table, I was told to stay quiet, like a tired pet. But the part that hurt wasn't the sentence itself. It was how normal it felt to be spoken to like that. How my body didn't even jolt. How my spine didn't straighten. Because somewhere along the way, I had already accepted the small seat. The turned back. The silence. Not anymore. I made my tea. Strong. No sugar. Sat in my usual chair. Noticed how the cushion had flattened. Everything in this apartment bore the shape of me. The teacups, the pillows, the bent reading glasses. a quiet archive of someone who lived for others long after they stopped noticing. I pulled out the metal box from the top cupboard, the one with the receipts. Not because I needed them, I knew the figures by heart, but sometimes it helps to hold proof in your hands. Claire's tuition, 4 years at St. Mary's, $42,000. Brian's second mortgage, $68,500. The money I wired when Marlene's boutique almost made it, $15,000. And a dozen smaller sums, the holiday loan, the car insurance, the new water heater, just until next month. I had kept every transfer slip, every bank letter, every handwritten IOU, and not once had I asked for it back. That wasn't the deal. I gave out of love, out of belief, out of the simple, stubborn hope that family meant something. But love, I've learned, is not a blank check, and belief can curdle if no one keeps it warm. I sat with the box for a while, then slid it back in place. Not out of sight, just out of the way. I wasn't ready to let go of those papers, but I didn't need them weighing down my table this morning. Instead, I took out a sheet of fresh paper and began a new list. Call the bank on Monday. Review automatic payments. Schedule appointment with attorney. Not in anger, in clarity. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't going to write anyone out of anything. Not yet. But I needed to wake up. Reclaim the parts of myself I'd given away too cheaply. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Hey, sorry if yesterday was awkward. I was tired. Hope you're okay. No punctuation, no ownership. Just vague apology wrapped in the gauze of youth. I didn't answer. Not because I was punishing her, but because I was done cushioning her. At noon, the doorbell rang. It was Henry. Morning, Aunt B, he said with that crooked grin of his. You up for some errands? Henry is my sister's boy. Technically my great-nephew. Grew up rougher than Claire, less polished, more kind. Works construction now, drives a rusted truck, brings me groceries without asking. He calls me Aunt B because Great Aunt Betty sounds like a ghost. I'm always up, I said, grabbing my coat. He didn't ask questions. Just carried the bag, opened the car door, made me laugh about the time he tried to fix a leaking pipe and flooded his landlord's entire basement. With Henry, I felt seen, not pitied, not tolerated, but seen. We stopped at the post office, the pharmacy, then the bakery with the blueberry danishes I like. This one's on me, he said, waving away my purse. I hit overtime this week. I could have cried. Instead, I took the pastry, touched his arm, and said, Thank you, dear. On the drive back, he asked if I wanted help with anything around the apartment. I almost said no out of habit, but then stopped myself. Actually, I said, yes. There's a box of documents I need to sort through. Financial things. Can you bring it down from the cupboard for me? He nodded. No questions. When we got back, he fetched the box, placed it gently on the kitchen table, and gave me a hug. The kind that doesn't feel earned, just given. You okay, Aunt B? I will be, I said. And I meant it. That evening, I sat with the documents for hours, but I didn't read them. Not at first. I just looked at them. The pages, the dates, the numbers. It's strange how memory comes not just in stories, but in ink, in bank statements, and handwritten notes. I had kept them all, not because I was meticulous, but because I was waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know. Maybe for someone to notice. Maybe for someone to ask. No one ever did. I took out a folder labeled Brian House. Inside, the agreement we signed when I gave him the money for his second mortgage. It wasn't a legal document, just something we scribbled on a yellow pad, sitting at this same table. "You'll get it back, Mom. You know I always make good on my word." He never did. And after the first few years, I stopped expecting it. I told myself I was helping, that it didn't matter. But it did. Next came the folder for Claire's education. Receipts from the bursar's office, printouts of payment confirmations. I remembered the day she got into St. Mary's, how she burst into my apartment, tears in her eyes, saying, "Grandma, I did it." I had cried too. Then I'd written the first check. I remember her graduation. They didn't save me a front row seat. I stood at the back, behind two women in tall hats. Claire waved at someone in the crowd. I waved back, but I don't think she saw me. I kept going through the papers, slower now. Some pages were smudged, old water stains from a leak years ago. Others were pristine. No one had touched them since the day they were filed. Then I found a letter. Folded small, tucked inside an envelope with no stamp. Claire's handwriting, unmistakably hers. I almost didn't open it. "Grandma," it began, "thank you for always believing in me. I don't know how I would have made it without your help. I promise I'll make you proud." It was dated 2018. I stared at the letter for a long time, read it once, then again. Something in my chest shifted. Not a softening, not forgiveness, but recognition. She had loved me once, or at least she'd known she owed me something. Maybe that was what made yesterday so sharp. When you've once known sweetness, bitterness is harder to swallow. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke when the heater clicked, the room dim. The documents were still spread out in front of me, the letter still in my hand. I made tea, 1 cup. Sat back down. Then I picked up my phone. Attorney, trust, estate planning. I tapped the words into the search bar, found 3 firms in town, picked the one with the kindest face on the About page. Her name was Lillian, mid-50s, soft eyes, steel backbone, the kind you could trust with the whole story. I filled out the contact form, simple and direct. "I'm 77, recently retired. I have no spouse, 1 son, 1 granddaughter. I need help restructuring my will and protecting my assets. I'd like to discuss options privately. Betty Maxwell." I hit send, and then I exhaled. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was movement, a reclaiming. After that, I called the bank. Not the main line, my branch. Spoke with a young man named Jonah. He remembered me, said, "Of course, Mrs. Maxwell. We'll help you with whatever you need." I told him I wanted to cancel all regular transfers related to my family's accounts. He hesitated. "All of them?" "Yes, every single one. I'll come in Monday morning to finalize, but flag everything today." He cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am, it's your right." I thanked him. We hung up. There. That was the sound of a door closing. Softly, but firmly. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. No dreams, no rehearsals of things I should have said. Just sleep. Deep and quiet, like something being repaired. Sunday morning came cold and gray. I stayed in bed longer than usual. Not out of laziness, out of choice. When I got up, I didn't go straight to the kitchen. I sat at the vanity, brushed my hair slowly, watched my reflection. I looked older, yes, but not old. Not the way they said it. My skin had softened, but not my will. My hands were spotted, but still strong. I put on my wool coat, the one I hadn't worn since Richard's funeral. It was too nice for grocery errands, too formal for visits. But today, it felt right. I added the brooch he gave me in 1981, a gold pin in the shape of a bird. I went to the florist down the block. Bought myself a small bouquet. Pale yellow tulips. For someone special? The girl asked. I nodded. Yes. She wrapped them carefully. When I got home, I placed them on the table beside the documents. Not for Richard. Not for anyone else. For me. They say family dinners are where memories are made. In my case, they're where clarity is born. Cold, uninvited, and permanent. Monday came quietly. I dressed with intention. Gray trousers, navy blouse, coat fastened all the way up. I didn't wear perfume. I didn't want to smell nice for anyone. I just wanted to move through the day without softening the edges. At 8:55, I stood outside the bank, holding my gloves in one hand, the manila folder of documents in the other. The building wasn't grand, just a modest red brick corner branch with a green awning and a bell over the door that jingled when you entered. That bell used to make me feel welcome. This time, it just marked the start of something overdue. Jonah greeted me at the counter, as promised, young, polite, trying not to look surprised that I'd really come. "We have a private room ready for you," he said. We walked past rows of desks and potted plants. The room was small, a round table, 2 chairs, a box of tissues that hadn't been touched. Jonah opened his laptop. I opened my folder. "I've listed all recurring transfers here," I said, sliding the sheet toward him. "Each one I want suspended immediately." "I'll sign whatever you need." He glanced at the paper, then back at me. They cover a lot. Are you sure?" I looked him in the eye. Yes. To his credit, he didn't ask why. He just started typing. Mortgage assistance to Brian, canceled. Monthly car payments for Claire's SUV, canceled. Education fund deposits, canceled. Even the account I'd quietly opened for their summer vacation plans, the one they assumed I'd keep refilling, gone. By the time I signed the last form, my hands were steady. My name had never looked more deliberate. "We'll send you confirmation by mail," Jonah said, standing to shake my hand. "If you need anything, I'll let you know," I said. On the way out, I passed an old woman sitting near the ATM, peering at a receipt through her glasses. Her coat looked like mine, too nice for errands. I nodded. She nodded back. Nothing dramatic. Just one woman seeing another. After the bank, I walked 2 blocks to Lillian's law office. It was on the 2nd floor above a dentist. The kind of place you don't notice unless you're looking. I rang the bell. Her assistant, a middle-aged woman with sensible shoes and kind eyes, let me in. "Mrs. Maxwell?" she asked. "Yes. Right this way." Lillian met me with a firm handshake. She didn't do the false cheer I'd come to expect from professionals who deal with the elderly. No sweetie, no patronizing tone. Just, "Please, sit. Tell me what you need." So I did. I told her I had 1 son, 1 granddaughter, a lifetime of quiet giving, and that I was ready to restructure everything: will, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, trust accounts, all of it. "I don't want to disown anyone," I said, "but I want boundaries, legal ones." Lillian nodded as I spoke, taking notes without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "That's not only doable, it's wise." We spent the next hour reviewing options. She explained irrevocable trusts, beneficiary designations, stipulations I could include. At one point, she looked up and asked gently, "Do you expect this will cause conflict?" "I expect it'll cause silence," I said. "But that's not new." By the time I left her office, I had a folder of next steps and an appointment for the following week to sign everything. As I stepped back out onto the street, I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Brian, 1 from Marlene, A text from Claire. Grandma, can we talk sometime this week? I didn't answer. Let them sit in it for a while. Let them feel the stretch of space they'd carved. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home. For once, I bought things only I liked. Sharp cheddar, plums, a small jar of wildflower honey. No one else's allergies, no one else's preferences, no compromises. I was nearly home when I saw the mailman leaving my building. He tipped his hat. I nodded. Picked up the bundle of mail from the box. Bills, a flyer, and one envelope with Claire's handwriting. No stamp. Hand-delivered. I took it upstairs, set it on the table, stared at it for a long time. Didn't open it. Not out of spite. Out of pacing. Let the words wait, just like I had waited. Instead, I made a sandwich, poured tea, sat in the armchair that still carried the ghost of Richard's weight. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a reply. I was beginning to understand. The world doesn't hand back what you've lost, but you can stop handing over what you still have. That evening, I lit a candle. Not for anyone else, but for myself. I let it burn while the wind rattled the windows. And I thought, dignity is not something you demand. It's something you return to, like home. The envelope sat unopened on my kitchen table for 3 days. Each morning I'd pass it, glance at the handwriting, and keep walking. Not out of anger. I wasn't angry anymore. Something deeper than that had set in. A kind of resolve, a steadying. It takes time to realize that the people you love aren't coming to save you, and even longer to realize they were never supposed to. That part was always yours. On Wednesday, I finally opened it. Claire's letter was short, a single sheet, folded twice. No greeting, no dear grandma, just her words. Neat, precise, strangely careful. I didn't mean what I said. I was being stupid. I know I hurt you. I don't know how to fix that, but I want to. Can we talk? No signature, no love Claire. Just that. I folded it back up, slid it into the drawer next to the coupons I never used. I wasn't ready to decide what it meant. Not yet. That afternoon, I baked. I hadn't baked since before Richard died. I pulled the flour from the cupboard, wiped down the old metal sifter, felt my hands remember the rhythm. Butter, sugar, salt. My mother's recipe. Apricot tea cake. Not for anyone in particular. Just because I wanted to. I used to bake for family. For birthdays, holidays, Claire's recitals, Brian's promotions. Always trying to create warmth where there was only routine. But today, the kitchen was warm for me. The smell filled the apartment, clung to the walls like it had 20 years ago. I sat with a slice and a cup of black tea, the afternoon sun hitting the table just right. Quiet, but not lonely. I thought of Richard, of how he used to take 2 slices and say, one for me, one for my future regrets. He would have laughed at Claire's remark. Not because it wasn't cruel, but because he believed in confronting cruelty with clarity. What they say doesn't matter, he told me once. What you let them keep saying does. I hadn't let Claire keep saying it. That evening, the phone rang. It was Brian. I stared at the screen, let it ring, let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, it rang again, and again. On the 3rd call, I picked up. Hello? There was a pause, just long enough to carry weight. Mom, he said, his voice tight. We need to talk. I assumed we were, I replied. He sighed. Claire's upset. I imagine she is. She didn't mean what she said. And yet she said it. Another silence. Then, look, she wrote you a letter. I know. I don't know what you want from us, he said. We're trying here. Are you? I asked, gently now, not sharp, just tired. Or are you trying not to feel guilty? He didn't answer. I've spent a long time making things easy for you, I said. For all of you. Too long. But that time's over, Brian. A beat passed. What does that mean? It means I'm not funding your life anymore. His breath caught. I could hear it, even through the line. You're serious? I am. Mom, this is dramatic. You're acting like... No, I said, firm now. I've been acting like someone who thought being needed was the same as being loved. That's done. He was quiet. Then flatly, you're punishing us. I'm protecting myself. He didn't know what to say to that. I could hear his mouth open, then close. Brian, I said softly, if Claire wants to talk, she can call me herself. No intermediaries, no prepared speeches. He cleared his throat. Fine. Goodbye, son. I hung up. My hand shook a little, but only for a moment. Then I went to the kitchen, washed my cup, dried it, and placed it upside down in the rack. I slept early that night. No TV? No lights left on? The next morning, I woke before dawn. Watched the sky shift from slate to pale blue. It was raining, soft, steady. The kind of rain that made you feel clean even without stepping outside. I made porridge, sat in my robe with a blanket over my knees. My phone buzzed once, but I didn't check it. Instead, I looked at the folded letter again. I didn't open it this time. I just sat with the knowledge that I could. And that choice, the simple, steady power of choice, felt like the first real gift I'd received in years. It was Marlene's idea to host the women's lunch. This was before the dinner, before the remark, before everything froze. A few weeks earlier, she'd called me mid-morning, her voice high and sugary, the tone she used when she was laying track toward something. We're having a little get-together Saturday, she said. Just a few of us girls. Nothing big. Would love for you to come. Girls. The word rolled around in my mind like a marble on a table with a slope. I was 77. My knees hurt in the rain. I kept my pills sorted in a labeled box. Girls hadn't described me since the Eisenhower administration. But I said yes. Of course I did. That's what I used to do. Say yes. Show up. Be good. Make it easy. Saturday came with cold light and a sharp wind. I wore a long burgundy cardigan and the brooch Richard gave me on our last Christmas together. It wasn't for them. It was for me. A reminder that I hadn't always been invisible. Their house was warm, too warm, and smelled faintly of candles that cost too much and flowers that died quickly. Marlene greeted me with that air kiss again, already mid-conversation with a woman I didn't know. Oh, there she is, Marlene said. Everyone, this is Brian's mom, Betty. Not my mother-in-law, not Betty Maxwell. Just Brian's mom. A title, not a person. There were 5 of them total, all in that strange, ageless category women enter when they spend more time on their skincare than their friendships. Hair pulled tight, jewelry delicate, smiles practiced. They nodded in my direction, each holding a wine glass with a twist of lemon floating like an apology. We were just talking about aging, said one. Her name was Cheryl, I think. How the whole idea of 60 being the new 40 is nonsense. Oh, totally, another chimed in. I mean, we're not ancient yet, but come on. There's a point where you have to just let go. Exactly, said a third, crossing her legs carefully. Like, when women stop coloring their hair, it's not empowering, it's just giving up. They all laughed, delicately, like guilt-free calories. Marlene poured me a glass of wine without asking. White, overly chilled. She didn't offer me water or tea or even a seat. I found one on my own, a soft chair too low to be polite, and lowered myself into it without groaning. I listened. For nearly an hour they talked about Pilates instructors, Botox injections, podcasts about reinvention, hosted by women who had never worked a day without lighting and filters. They spoke of men as problems and daughters as projects. They mentioned their own mothers only in passing, like dusty obligations in suburban nursing homes. Not once did they ask me anything. Not where I'd worked, not how I'd raised my son, not what I'd seen. I was a stand-in, a museum piece. The elder they could point to when they needed perspective, then ignore the moment the conversation veered back to almond milk and destination spas. And then, as if on cue, one of them turned to me. "Betty," she said, "what do you think about all these women getting plastic surgery after 60? The others leaned in, not with curiosity, but with that eager hunger people have when they want the old lady to say something outdated so they can gently correct her. I looked at my wine, then back at them. "I think," I said slowly, "that when a woman reaches a certain age, she should do whatever the hell she wants, as long as she's not pretending it makes her immortal." There was a pause, a short one, then a few polite laughs. Someone said, "Well said," but it sounded like "good dog." After that, the conversation drifted away from me again. I didn't say another word. At one point, Marlene brought out photos from a recent party Claire had attended, some sort of networking thing for young professionals. "She looked so elegant," someone gushed. "She's definitely going places," another added. Marlene smiled, but it was tight around the corners. "She's got ambition, that's for sure. Brian worries she'll leave us all behind." I sipped my wine. In that moment, I realized something small but sharp. Marlene didn't like me. She never had. Not really. She tolerated me the way you tolerate a neighbor with a barking dog. Politely, from a distance, always with a plan for avoidance. And now, watching her with her friends, I understood why. I reminded her of what she was running from: age, dependence. The inconvenient truth that one day the guest room becomes a nursing home and your name slips off the family schedule like a forgotten appointment. I waited for the lunch to end. I said my goodbyes. Thanked them for the wine. Gave Marlene a smile that held no warmth, but all the civility I could still afford. On the drive home, Henry had offered to pick me up. I stared out the window at the passing houses, each one lit from inside with lives I didn't know. Henry didn't ask how it went, just glanced over and said, "You hungry, Aunt Bee?" I nodded. We stopped for burgers. Ate them in the car. No airs, no performances, just warmth. And later that night, alone in my apartment, I whispered into the quiet, "I am not what they see, and I do not need them to see it." Then I folded the cardigan, placed the brooch back in its box, and went to bed. No dreams, just rest. Claire used to call me Grandma B, with a squeal that could melt butter. Back when her cheeks were round and her knees still bruised from playgrounds, she'd run through my front door like it was home. Her backpack would fall to the floor, shoes kicked off in a hurry, and I'd hear the same phrase every time. "Got any cookies?" And I always did. Not store-bought, never store-bought. Oatmeal raisin with too much cinnamon, the way she liked. We'd sit on the old rug in the living room, her cross-legged, me kneeling beside her, the tray between us. I'd pour milk into a chipped blue mug that had once belonged to Richard, and she'd tell me everything. About school, about a friend who'd pulled her braid, about a secret crush in fourth grade she made me pinky swear not to tell her dad about. That little girl disappeared somewhere around her 12th birthday. It was gradual, the kind of change you don't notice until you're already losing it. First, the phone came everywhere, even to the dinner table. She started saying things like, "That's not how we do it now," with a tone that made me feel like I'd stepped out of a black and white movie. When I corrected her grammar one evening, gently, as I'd done 100 times before, she didn't apologize. She sighed, loudly. At 13, she started staying upstairs when I visited. At 14, she stopped hugging me altogether. At 15, she forgot my birthday. I told myself it was just adolescence. A phase. Brian said, "She's just busy, Mom." Marlene shrugged and said, "She's finding herself." But she wasn't. She was losing me. When Claire got into St. Mary's, I cried with pride. I told everyone, the pharmacist, the man at the bank, the woman who delivered my groceries. I sent her a card with a check tucked inside. Not a small one, big enough for books, supplies, and a nice dinner to celebrate. She texted back 3 words. "Thanks, that helps." No call, no visit, not even a picture of her dorm room. I framed the acceptance letter anyway, put it on the shelf near the TV. During her freshman year, she came home once, Thanksgiving. I made all her favorites: roasted carrots with honey glaze, mashed potatoes with garlic, the pie she once said no one made better than me. She took one bite, then set her fork down. "I'm trying to eat clean," she said. "This stuff's kind of heavy." Marlene laughed. "She's become such a city girl now." Claire didn't look up from her phone. That night, after they left, I wrapped the uneaten pie in foil and put it in the freezer. It stayed there until spring. The older she got, the more I watched her slip behind a glass wall I couldn't reach through. Her voice changed. Her laugh became sharper. The way she spoke to waitstaff, to cashiers, even to Brian, clipped, performative, always with an undercurrent of judgment. She didn't get it from me. The last time she came to my apartment, she brought her boyfriend. I can't remember his name. James? Jason? Something that sounded expensive. She wore a beige coat that cost more than my monthly pension and looked around the room like it needed renovating. "It's cute," she said. "Like vintage, like a time capsule." She meant it as a compliment, I think, but her tone was flat. She declined tea. Her boyfriend accepted, then didn't drink it. They stayed 38 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. When they left, she hugged me lightly, arms barely touching, like someone handling something fragile, but not precious. That was last year. Since then, I'd only seen her twice. Once at Brian's birthday dinner, where she talked about a job she didn't like but wouldn't leave, and once at Marlene's garden party, where she introduced me to someone as my grandmother. She's super traditional. I laughed politely, then walked away. It wasn't just the distance, it was the erosion, the slow, quiet way someone forgets you're human, the way you become a prop, the older woman in the family photos. The one who sits in the corner while the real conversations happen. But the hardest part? I still loved her, still remembered the way she used to braid my hair when she was 7, tiny, clumsy knots that pulled too hard. Still remembered her drawings stuck to my fridge. Still remembered how she once cried when a bird flew into the window and how she buried it in the garden with 2 popsicle sticks for a cross. She wasn't born cold. She was shaped by years, by her parents, by a culture that tells young people old things are useless And yet, when she said, "Don't talk, you're old," something inside me didn't just crack. It settled. Because I finally knew. The girl who once clung to my hand at the zoo was gone. In her place stood a woman I didn't recognize. But I would not spend the rest of my life trying to earn her affection like a prize. The version of her that once loved me might return someday. But I wouldn't wait. I had already waited too long. The invitation came in a group message. No phone call, no handwritten note. Just a text sent to me, Brian, Marlene, and Claire. It read, "Sunday lunch, casual, 1 p.m., bring nothing." Bring nothing. I stared at that phrase longer than I should have. 4 syllables that somehow managed to feel both instructive and final. And yet, I baked a pear tart anyway. Not because I thought they'd want it, but because I wanted to bring something of myself into that house, one last time. Their front door opened before I could knock. Brian stood there in khakis and a sweater the color of wet cement. "Mom," he said flatly, "glad you could make it." "Brian," I replied and stepped inside. The house was warm, always too warm, and it smelled like citrus. A candle, probably. Not the real thing. Marlene appeared from the kitchen, all polished charm. She air-kissed my cheek, murmured something about how, "It's just the 5 of us today, nice and simple." I handed her the tart. "Oh," she said, surprised. "That wasn't necessary." "I know," I said. "I brought it anyway." Claire was already seated at the dining table, legs crossed, phone in hand. She didn't look up. Not when I entered, not when I hung up my coat, not even when I passed behind her to reach my seat. We sat. Roast chicken, asparagus, a quinoa salad with cranberries. Everything looked like it had come from a cookbook designed to impress people you don't know well. Marlene poured wine. Claire accepted hers with a nod. I was given water. They talked. About Claire's job. Something about a new account. About Brian's latest client. About Marlene's book club reading something light but literary. No one asked me anything. I cut my chicken in small, deliberate bites. The room felt crowded with unsaid things. Every clink of cutlery landed louder than it should have. Claire spoke the most. She talked about strategic visibility, about networking, about who she'd met at a gallery opening. Her tone was confident, performative, like she was speaking for a camera. Then came the moment. I had just offered to pass the salt, quietly, just a small gesture. And Claire, without looking up, said, "Don't talk. You're old." There was no smile, no laugh, just the words thrown like a stone into the center of the table. Silence followed. Marlene shifted in her seat. Brian cleared his throat. No one corrected her. No one looked at me. I placed the salt shaker down gently. Then I picked up my glass of water, held it steadily, and turned my eyes to Claire. "Yet still smarter than your father," I said. The room went still. Brian looked up, startled. Claire blinked. Marlene reached for her wine. No one spoke. I didn't lower my gaze. I didn't soften my voice. I didn't laugh to make it easier. I just sipped my water. Slowly. Then I set the glass down and unfolded my napkin across my lap, as if nothing had happened. Claire stared at me, half shocked, half confused, like she'd pressed a button she didn't expect to work. Marlene broke the silence. "Well," she said, too brightly, "this chicken turned out beautifully." But no one touched their plates. Brian reached for the wine bottle, poured himself a second glass without asking. I didn't eat another bite. I let the moment hang in the air like smoke. Silent, undeniable. Because here's what they didn't expect. that I would speak, that I would fight back, that I had the voice and the will and the right. They had gotten so used to my silence, my baked goods, my careful nods and polite laughter, they'd forgotten what I was before I became the family help desk. They forgot I once ran a classroom of 30 teenagers who'd rather die than be corrected, and I still made them listen. They forgot I negotiated with administrators, stood up to school boards, wrote grants from scratch, handled parent meetings with quiet grace and steel. They forgot that silence, for me, was never weakness. It was choice. That day, I chose to stop protecting them from the truth of their own behavior. When the meal ended, I stood, took my coat, and left the tart behind on the counter. No one said goodbye. They didn't need to. I'd already said enough. After I walked out of that house, I didn't look back. Not out of pride, out of preservation. Some things, once spoken, should be left to settle in the air behind you, untouched, unrevised. The street was quiet. A thin wind pulled at the hem of my coat. The clouds hung low, heavy with the kind of weather that never quite becomes rain. I walked to the corner where Henry had promised to meet me, tart words still fresh on my tongue, but my hands steady. He was already there, parked under a crooked tree, engine running, music low. I opened the door, sat down, and fastened my seatbelt. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then, casually, he asked, "Good lunch?" I smiled. Not bitter, not amused, just small. "No," I said, "but necessary." He nodded once and pulled away from the curb. We stopped for coffee. Not at one of those sleek places with too much foam and not enough warmth. Just a corner cafe with chipped mugs and scratched tables. Henry ordered black. I had mine with milk. We sat in the back, near the window. "You know," he said, stirring his cup, "most people wouldn't have said anything, just taken it. Pretended it didn't sting. Most people aren't 77 with nothing left to lose," I said. But that wasn't true. I hadn't lost everything. I still had my mind, my memories, my home, my name. And now, after too long, I had a boundary. A quiet, invisible line that marked where their comfort ended and my dignity began. Henry didn't ask for details. That was the thing about him. He never pressed, just made space. Sometimes that's all you need. Someone who doesn't look at you like a puzzle, but a person. After coffee, he dropped me off at my building. I didn't invite him in. He didn't expect me to. We hugged at the curb. No words, just warmth. Upstairs, the apartment smelled faintly of apricot, remnants of the tart I'd made 2 days before. I set my bag down, took off my coat, and stood in the center of the living room, listening to the quiet. No calls, no texts, no follow-up. They weren't used to being confronted. Not like that. I imagined the ride home after I left. The silence, the tension, the reaching for explanations. Claire might have been furious. Marlene, tight-lipped. Brian. I wasn't sure. Maybe ashamed. Maybe just inconvenienced. But none of them had called. And that silence? It felt honest. For once, we weren't pretending. I heated soup for dinner, tomato and barley. Nothing special, just warm. Ate at the kitchen table with the radio on low. The news murmured in the background. Politics, weather, something about a new traffic light downtown. I didn't think about them. Not much. Just enough to recognize the ache where something used to sit. The hope that someday, if I just stayed kind, stayed generous, they'd see me again. Not as a fixture, as a person. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters, took out the trash. Then I sat in the chair by the window with a blanket across my legs, tea in hand, and watched the streetlights flicker on. No grief, no victory, just stillness. The kind that comes when you've finally told the truth out loud and no longer need anyone to echo it back. That night, I slept without waking. The kind of sleep that doesn't ask permission. She came on a Tuesday. No call, no message. Just a soft knock on the door around 4:30, when the light outside had turned the hallway a pale, uncertain gold. I stood there for a moment, hand on the doorknob, listening. The knock came again. Not urgent, not timid, just there. When I opened the door, Claire stood on the mat, arms crossed over her chest, a paper bag in one hand. No makeup, no coat. Her eyes, wide and uncertain, met mine without flinching. "Hi," she said. I didn't move aside. Not yet. "What brings you?" I asked, calm. She looked down at the bag. "I brought pastries. From that place on Chestnut. The one you like." It was true. I did like that place. Or used to. I stepped back without speaking, let her pass through the doorway. She didn't look around, didn't comment on the apartment or ask about the smell of soup still in the air. She just walked to the kitchen counter and placed the bag down carefully, like it might break. "I can't stay long," she said, turning to face me. I nodded. "That's probably wise." She flinched, just slightly, then took a breath. "Look," she started. "I know I was rude, at dinner, and before that." I raised an eyebrow. "Rude is one word for it." Another breath, this one slower. "Disrespectful? Dismissive? Hurtful? Pick one." I didn't reply. Claire shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She wasn't used to silence that didn't collapse into sympathy. "I've been thinking about what you said," she went on, "about being smarter than Dad." "That wasn't the point," I said finally. She blinked. "Then what was?" "That I still see everything, even when you pretend I don't." Silence again. Not cold, but dense. She stepped closer to the table, pulled out a chair but didn't sit. Just placed her hand on the backrest like she might need it for balance. "You used to make me tea every time I came over. You used to thank me for it." She nodded. "Fair." I stayed by the counter, arms crossed loosely. I wasn't angry, not in the way she expected. I was watching her, not just her words, her posture, her restraint. She wasn't here to grovel. She was here because something had cracked, and she didn't know how to patch it yet. "I talked to Dad," she said. "He told me what you said. And about the money. I'm sure he wasn't pleased." "He wasn't," she admitted, "but he didn't deny any of it. That surprised me. I didn't let it show." "I didn't come to argue," Claire said. "That's good," I replied, "because I'm done explaining." She nodded, looked down, then back up. "I'm trying to figure out who I am, and I guess somewhere along the way, I started thinking that meant pushing away everything that felt old." "Old as in irrelevant?" I asked. "No," she said, then hesitated. "Well, maybe. Yes, at the time." I waited. "I don't know who taught me that," she said quietly, "but I learned it." "You didn't learn it from me." "No," she whispered. "I didn't." She pulled out the chair and sat, not comfortably, not like someone returning home, like someone admitting they didn't have another place to go that day. "I've been angry a long time," she said, "about things I don't even understand fully, about being expected to be perfect, to succeed, to be more than I am. You've mistaken that pressure for permission to be cruel." She didn't argue. "I don't want to be that person anymore," she said, "but I don't know how to start." I took a long breath. "Starting doesn't require a speech," I said. Just consistency. She looked up, met my eyes. So, I shouldn't expect forgiveness? I tilted my head. You should expect to work for it. Claire sat back, quiet now, not offended, just still. Can I come again next week? She asked. I studied her face. There was no performance in it this time. You can come, I said. I'll decide if you stay. She smiled, but it didn't reach all the way. Then she stood, adjusted the strap on her bag, and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. I really was a brat, she said. Not always, I replied, but enough to notice. And I closed the door gently behind her. The world didn't change after that Tuesday. The streets still filled with the same dull hum of traffic by 9. The mail still came late on Thursdays. My knees still ached when the weather dipped below 50. But something had shifted. Not in them. In me. It began with a letter. Not from Claire, not from Brian. From Louise. A woman I'd worked with 30 years ago at the school. We hadn't spoken in at least a decade. She'd read my name in the newsletter the Retired Teachers Union sends out every season. A small note about how I'd attended the spring luncheon and looked well. Her handwriting hadn't changed. I still remember how you stood up to the principal when they tried to cut the library hours, she wrote. You were the only one who said no out loud. You always did know when enough was enough. I hope that part of you is still alive and kicking. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't dramatic, just warm, just steady. The kind of affirmation that lands quietly but stays. 2 days later, a neighbor from down the hall knocked on my door. Maureen, mid-60s, widowed last year, 2 sons who lived too far away to be helpful. She held a tin of shortbread cookies and a folded scarf. I was clearing out, she said. Found this. Thought maybe you'd want it. The scarf had been mine once, lent to her during a snowstorm the winter before last. I'd forgotten about it entirely. She stayed for tea. We didn't talk about anything large, just weather, window repairs, a program she'd seen about widows in Norway of all things. But at the end, as she packed up to leave, she touched my arm and said, You know, I always admired how you carry yourself. You never shrink, even when people pretend not to see you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled and said thank you. It happened again at the pharmacy. The young woman behind the counter, Nia, I think, paused while scanning my prescription. I saw you once at the park, she said. You were reading on a bench, and some man tried to sell you something. You told him, I don't buy nonsense, thank you. I laughed for a whole day about that. I chuckled. Did I say that? You did, she said. It was kind of badass. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about legacy. It was about knowing that the version of me I feared had vanished. The woman with spine, with voice, with boundaries, was still visible to others, even if not to my family. Not long after, Henry came by again. No reason. Just said he had a few extra apples from the market and thought I'd want some. He sat at the table, peeled one with the dull paring knife I've used for 30 years. Claire came to see you? He asked casually. She did. How'd that go? She didn't stay long. He nodded. Good. I looked at him. Good? Means she's thinking, he said. People don't stay long when they're not ready to hear the answers. He didn't press for more. Later that day, I took out the scarf Maureen returned, washed it by hand, let it dry near the window. It smelled faintly of her perfume, lavender and something faintly citrus. I folded it neatly and placed it in my drawer. A small return, not dramatic, not emotional, just a loop quietly closed. In the evening, I walked to the corner store. Not because I needed anything. I had milk, bread, tea. But I wanted the air, the movement. The clerk, young and tired-looking, barely glanced up as I placed a tin of sardines and a small bar of dark chocolate on the counter. Then he paused. "You're the one who lives in 2B, right?" I nodded. "My grandma used to live there," he said. "A long time ago. Said it was the only place she ever felt safe." I didn't ask her name, just smiled. "Well," I said, "it's still good for that." When I got home, I made toast. Ate it slowly. Watched the evening slip into night. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. The world hadn't changed. My family hadn't called. Claire hadn't come back. But I had heard enough from unexpected places to know I wasn't wrong. Sometimes the world nods at you softly. Quiet affirmations tucked into letters, cookies, and apples. It doesn't shout. It doesn't cheer. It just says, "I saw you, and you're right to keep going." The phone rang just after 7. Not a message, not a missed call. A full ring, intentional, old-fashioned. The kind of call you make when silence has stretched a little too far. I stared at the screen. Brian. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello?" "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice carried that familiar tone. Too careful, too practiced. "Brian. I just wanted to check in. It's been a bit." "Yes." A pause. I didn't fill it. "I know things got tense," he said. "Claire regrets what she said." I stayed quiet. "She didn't mean it," he added quickly. "She's young and she's old enough to mean what she says." He hesitated. "Okay, but she feels bad." "I imagine she feels many things." He sighed. "Look, I don't want to argue. I just want things to go back to normal." "That's why they can't." Silence. "You think I'm overreacting," I said. "I think you're upset," he replied, "and making choices based on that. You think I'm not thinking clearly." He didn't answer. I moved to the kitchen window. Outside, the street lamp buzzed faintly. Leaves scattered across the sidewalk. "I spent years fading into the background," I said. "Helping, giving, staying silent. I thought that was love. I thought being useful would keep me in the room. Mom, I helped you buy your house, paid for Claire's school, filled the freezer when no one asked. And still, I was treated like furniture. Polite, quiet, expected. I never meant to, but you let it happen," I cut in. "You let them speak over me, dismiss me, and you never stepped in." His breathing shifted on the other end. "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I said. "I'm just done pretending." "I get that," he said softly. "I do. I just didn't realize how far it had gone. You never had to ask what I gave up. You were too used to it being there." Another pause. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't need to fix it," I said. "You need to sit with it. Let it be uncomfortable." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Can I come by this weekend?" "You can, but I'm not pouring tea. You'll get your own." A small, uneasy chuckle. "Fair." "I'm not the mother you remember," I said. "Not anymore. I think maybe I never really knew who you were." That landed. Not cruel, just true. "Well," I said, "you'll get your chance." We didn't say goodbye. He hung up gently. I stood by the window a little longer. The world outside looked the same. Cars parked in the same crooked line, porch lights flickering on. But something inside had shifted. For the first time in years, I'd spoken to my son without lowering myself to be heard. And I didn't feel guilt, only clarity. He came on a Sunday. Late morning, without flowers, without fanfare. Just Brian, in a navy coat and worn shoes, holding a small paper bag that looked like it came from the corner deli. No car engine idling outside, no Marlene, no Claire. I let him knock twice before opening the door. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind you earn when a mirror has been held up to you and you don't like what you see. "Hi, Mom." "Brian." "I brought some of those sesame rolls you used to like," he said, holding up the bag. "I still like them." He looked relieved, just barely. I stepped aside and let him in. He walked in slowly, like the floor might creak in judgment. I'd already made tea, 2 mugs this time. No fanfare, just quiet readiness. We sat at the kitchen table. He glanced at the photos on the shelf, none recent. He didn't comment. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes," he said. "I didn't say yes. I said you could come." He gave a small nod. "Right." We sat in silence for a few moments, drinking our tea. I waited. I had no intention of filling the space for him. Finally, he spoke. "You were right," he said. "About a lot of things. I know. I think I've been hiding behind busyness, behind Claire, behind Marlene, if I'm honest. It's easier that way, delegating family the way I delegate at work. And I've let you." He looked up at me. "I know." Another pause. "I didn't see it," he admitted. "Not really. I saw the help, the support, but not the cost. I didn't think about how that made you feel." "No," I said gently. "You didn't have to. I never asked you to." He winced a little. "Claire's struggling. More than she lets on. She's not as put together as she wants us to believe." "She's 25, I said. "She's allowed to be lost. She's not allowed to be cruel." He didn't argue. "I used to think," he said slowly, "that you liked being the helper, the one who held everything together. I did, until I didn't." He took a sip of tea. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "I did, just not in ways you noticed." He rubbed his hands together. The winter air had dried his skin. For a moment, he looked like a boy again, awkward, trying to say something right. "Do you want an apology?" "No," I said. "I want change. Consistent, quiet change. I want you to speak up when someone talks over me. I want you to visit because you want to, not because Marlene tells you to. I want you to stop treating me like a fixture." He nodded. "I can do that. I'll believe it when I see it." He didn't flinch. Fair. There was a stillness in the room, not tense, not empty, just honest. 2 people sitting in the middle of a shared reckoning. "Claire asked if she could come by again," he said. "She can. But she'll carry her own weight when she does." He smiled a little. "You've changed." "I haven't," I said. "I've just stopped pretending I didn't notice." He nodded again, this time slower. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Handed it to me. "I know you don't want money," he said. "But this isn't about that. It's just something I should have done years ago." I didn't open it. Just looked at him. "I'm not asking for credit," he added quickly. "Just trying to show up better." "Then keep doing it," I said. "Don't pay me off. Prove it." He swallowed hard. "Okay." I slid the envelope to the side of the table. We finished our tea. He stayed another 15 minutes, talked about a new client, the heater that wouldn't stop clicking in their attic. Mundane things. Normal things. When he stood to leave, he looked unsure. "Can I hug you?" I stood too. "Yes. But don't rush it." He stepped forward slowly, wrapped his arms around me. not tight, just real, a little hesitant, a little human. It wasn't emotional. It was quiet, solid. When he let go, he looked at me like he hadn't in years, with attention. "I'll call you Tuesday," he said. "I'll answer," I replied. He left without asking for leftovers, without assuming he'd be forgiven. And I didn't offer him anything except the truth. When the door closed, I sat back at the table. The envelope still sat there, untouched. I didn't open it. Not out of defiance, out of pacing. Trust, like any good bread, needs time to rise again. The days that followed were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels like waiting or punishment. Just peace. Simple, solid, ordinary peace. I moved through my routines. Tea in the morning, a walk when the weather allowed, soup on the stove, the hum of the radio in the late afternoon. But something had changed, and it wasn't just in them. It was in me. Claire came back a week later. She didn't bring pastries this time. No defense in her eyes. She just knocked once and stood there with her hands tucked into her coat sleeves. "I didn't know if you'd answer," she said. "I didn't know if you'd knock," I replied. I let her in. She made her own tea, washed the mug afterward, sat on the edge of the armchair with both feet flat on the floor, like a student waiting for a lesson she'd finally come ready to hear. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said, about how people stop seeing you once you stop being convenient." I nodded. "I think I've done that to a lot of people," she admitted. "Not just you." "That's often how it starts," I said. "One blind spot, then another." "I'm trying to listen more. I don't really know how to fix what I broke." "Then don't rush to fix it. Just stop breaking it." She looked up at me, her face softer than I'd seen in years. "Do you think we can start again?" "No," I said, "but we can start forward." And we did. She stayed for an hour, told me about her job, the real parts, not the polished ones, about her doubts, her loneliness, her exhaustion from always pretending she had it together. I didn't offer advice, just listened. She didn't ask for grace, just gave me presence. When she left, she hugged me, fully, with both arms. No hesitation. "I'll come back next week," she said. "I'll be here," I replied. And I meant it. Later that evening, I sat by the window with my tea. The light had faded. The world outside moved slowly. A neighbor walking their dog, a child tugging at a coat sleeve, someone's television flickering through a curtain. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Claire, not at Brian, not even at Marlene, who I doubted would ever change. But that no longer concerned me. What mattered was the line I'd drawn, not to divide us, but to define myself. To say, this is where I stand. This is what I will not shrink for. This is who I am when I'm not busy being what you need. I had thought, for too long, that age meant fading, that dignity meant silence, that if I just kept giving, someone would finally see me as whole. But I've learned something else now, that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own footsteps leaving a room you were never truly invited into. Sometimes it's pouring your own tea, saying no without anger, holding a boundary without apology. And sometimes it's telling your granddaughter, the one who once made you feel like a relic, that you will not go quietly into her convenient narrative. I still make soup. I still fold laundry with care. I still clip coupons I might never use. I am still who I was, but I am no longer hidden. And if you're reading this, if you've ever felt invisible, let me say this to you clearly. You are not too old to take up space. You are not too kind to say no. You are not too late to start again. You are not done. Let them underestimate you. Let them forget what you carried, what you sacrificed, what you know. Then, when it matters, raise your glass. Speak clearly. And let them remember. If this story meant something to you, share it. Save it. Leave a comment. Someone out there needs to hear it too.